Is inZOI good yet? No. That's my simple and blunt current opinion. But if you fancy a brutally honest discussion about the state of the game, which explains why I think that, stick around. So, it's been a few months since inZOI launched into early access, and soon after that, the devs announced a roadmap plan to implement monthly hotfixes and bi monthly updates with new features and content. So, since launch, some hotfixes plus one of what the devs consider to be a larger update have been implemented. Now, I fell out with inZOI in a previous encounter before the May update, when the game kept deleting the hundreds of rocks that I'd built into a custom dry stone wall because I like to torture myself that way. But since then, both that and a new June patch have been added, and as mostly a builder, I approached this inZOI revisit wanting to see if the state of build mode had improved. That was my plan anyway, but this is about iteration 4 of this video that I'd planned to make, where I simply wanted to test build mode again, because the more I gathered information for this video, the more I started to become somewhat concerned. So the first thing I discovered was the June update isn't actually a June update, it's the May one, delayed by a month, as conveyed in a post labeled Update Schedule Change and Modkit Notice. And you need to get comfortable hearing about the Modkit because she's going to be a reoccurring character today. So we have an intro that basically says, hi, pretty much we listened to your feedback, guys. Then an apology that the update was delayed due to the team wanting to prioritize quality over speed, which is fair. And then the post just blabs on about this Modkit in full depth. And finishes with other game improvements in the June update, which solely talks about ZOI behavior and absolutely nothing else. So, no build changes then? Now, I already knew that new build mode features had been planned for later in the roadmap this year, such as terrain editing and pools, so I didn't expect those to be added and won't complain that there are no new build mode features since they already communicated the timing of those. However, I did have some expectations for its existing features because presumably those existing features are what the devs are working on if no new ones have been added, right? But before we dive into that, I will note the few features and additions to the game that have been added outside of build mode, which are apparently quality over speed, and are entirely ZOI behavior related, which I don't care about, but understand that a large number of people who played live mode do. So since the update, that was in June, but actually the May one, you can now adopt a child or have a child without being married or through medical assistance. You can romance teenagers, you can exchange gifts, and a few other things to initiate ZOI interactions, but that's not important. What's important is that they added gays like everyone wanted. So now you can slay, serve, gag, and goop the house down for pride. And that might be important to you, but what's important to inZOI and what they need you to know is very important and not to forget about is the developing and expanding modding toolkit, which seems to be very high in their priority list and a key point in many of their announcements. We'll get back to that. They have also added new cheats through a console, plus a list of cheats, and you can access this console with the exact same hotkey combo as in The Sims, Control-Shift-C, except when I did this, nothing popped up, and I did it in almost every combination in both live mode and build mode, so I guess it's just not working right now, I don't know. But onto build mode additions, which is initially what I planned this video to be, and this also applies to Create a ZOI because we find that both of these gameplay elements have had basically nothing added to them other than items, and I love more items. I have so much SimCC, I'm just a big item hoarding magpie, but after having a look through them, they do seem to all be the same modern show home style, which is it's fine, but feels like they're just finishing a set that wasn't complete at launch. And the addition of these doesn't actually let you build anything that you couldn't already do with a more limited palette. They've also added some more textures in an earlier hotfix, which I endorse since the create a texture AI thing is kind of pants the house down and really not the solution to the lack of patterns that I thought it might be. However, I will ask, if it's apparently only trained on in-house and licensed art as the devs communicated in a post regarding the AI backlash, how does it kind of know what Edna Mode from The Incredibles looks like? However, despite many people saying they find the inZOI build mode tools hard to use, which I don't necessarily agree with, but absolutely concede that they are sometimes awkward and force you to pre-plan a build with some problem-solving solutions. The devs don't seem to have adjusted a single feature to provide more options and make them more intuitive. For example, many people were struggling to build paths, yet there are still no floor tiles, and the objects called floor tiles don't behave in an adjustable tile-by-tile way that people have come to expect them to in a building game, meaning the only way to build a path remains to be by building a room and deleting the ceiling and the wall. And if you want to place a roof on that ceiling, another problem people were struggling with, well, those still don't connect to each other in any way or allow you to overlap them intuitively, forcing you to use the Alt key. And once placed, you still can't isolate the side awnings to adjust one of them or place any wall items on the part of the roof that is clearly a wall. The recent patch says roofing adjustments have been made, but just doesn't specify how, and I cannot see any difference when I'm playing the game. Oh, and remember when we were all excited by the thought of connecting these different wall heights that you can see in build menu? Well, you still can't do that, so that's that. And the giant bug that I ran into where the game deletes all of the items in a room that you've placed using Alt when you make a single infrastructure adjustment, yep, that's still there. It's not even listed in the known issues, of which, for build mode, there is a whopping total of 3. And what you see now on the screen is the entirety of the current known issues post, despite the player base constantly listing them in the inZOI Discord server. The game has updated to now allow you to actually overlap all of the items that should overlap using Alt, including this grass tile that I kept complaining about, and this outdoor path and decking tiles, making those a bit more viable and less frustrating as a pathing option. And there are some lovely new windows and doors in the style of, can you guess? That's right, super modern Shoujo. I know you're all gagged and stunned by that. But in my opinion, the only decent feature they've really added, which I heard a lot of feedback about initially and is technically still an item, but it's some shorter length staircases, which does give you more room in your build, but the community had sort of kinda already found a workaround to this by building tiny platforms as steps instead, although this is much easier and less time consuming, so I will call that a positive, if not immediately necessary addition. But as you can see, other than a few nuanced bug hotfixes, build mode is basically the same, as is inZOI. And sure, they are slowly adding more live mode interactions, but I don't think they really appreciate that. Even mostly live mode players will often begin a new game with a fresh new family, wanting to build that one perfect house in a style that they love. And I'm sure that build mode is putting people off beyond the sole build mode players like myself. Now, I understand that different dev teams do different things, and it would be stupid to tell the devs who are working on creating items to stop doing that and go work on the build features, because that's not their job, and it's unfair to blame them all. And I see many people discussing this and constantly reminding people of the inner functionings of a game studio, because everyone is an expert who has a friend, who has a second cousin who is a game dev or something. But even if this is the case, is it even relevant, and why should people care? In what other industry do we put little protective cushions around the companies and staff in the same way that we do in the games industry to protect their feelings? When the cladding was being replaced on my old apartment building and kept being delayed by months at a time, do you think anyone cared if the builders had run into a few extra problems and were waiting for a material delivery from a third party that they had no control over? No, they didn't. They complained because that wasn't their problem. It was poor organization and skill distribution from the building company. It's not our problem as consumers to be all empathetic towards devs and their delays and the work pile up and that they just have so much to do, because nobody forced the company to accept payments for an early access product. That doesn't fly in any other industry, so why should it here? So I question, as someone who has bought this, what the inZOI management have the people who are working on build mode features doing right now. And when we aren't seeing needed quality of life adjustments and additions to the current features, I have to assume they're focused on finishing the ones that aren't in the game yet. And cool, maybe we'll get pools and terrain tools soon, but those aren't going to make me come back and build when half my items still get deleted and the roofs are annoying to work with. And I didn't plan this video with concern, But now I find that I am concerned because I had assumed that the game was placed into an early access build in which the devs realized the features were complete and had likely already got patches lined up to continue adjusting those features. But after some updates, and I've come back and had a look, literally nothing has changed. And on top of that, having gone into early access, the devs are likely now reshuffling a bunch of plans in order to implement feedback requests to show that they are listening to the community, which potentially caused this May to June delay. And that makes me question now if early access was released at the healthiest time for this game, or whether, likely being aware that Paralives is also releasing this year, early access was rushed out to try and snatch up a player base that they fear may have stuck with that game instead. But regardless, hi inZOI, I'm also going to include my feedback requests. But don't worry, I'm not going to ask you for a bucket list of instant new features like half of the posts I see on Discord. I just ask that the ones already in the game be expanded upon. Firstly, let me isolate and edit the side awnings of the roof like I can at the front and the rear. Then please have the game recognize that the roof has a wall and let me place items on it. I feel that's quite simple. Also, let me link the different wall heights. I'm sure this one is a little bit more complicated, but why have they added the ability to place different wall heights on the same level if they didn't intend to do this? Now also let me draw a texture on the floor, tile by tile, to make a path. Instead of having to build a room every time that adds a ceiling for me to delete, you can literally just copy The Sims, like you copied the cheat console shortcut, proving that you obviously realize most people coming to the game are Sims players. Just lean into that like nobody cares. And in spirit of copying The Sims, just copy their object by category system too, because organizing by room constantly is tedious, and sometimes I want toothbrushes in the kitchen because my ZOI is a multitasking icon. And if you can't do any of that, once you get the cheat console working, just add a cheat that lets us disable all of these collision rules and a second cheat that blocks the game from deleting items when we make infrastructure adjustments. Basically, just add the move object cheat from The Sims. Actually, just be The Sims. Now, before everyone calls me a Sims simp or something, trust me, I have issues with The Sims too. Arguably more important ones because they are on a moral level. I have no issue with declaring that I believe The Sims functions on a predatory and exploitative monetization system and have split what used to be one expansion into multiple DLCs of varying unnecessary pack types to rinse their devoted player base for the entire lifespan of The Sims 4. And that's the main reason that I want inZOI to do well. But I also think that they need to stop trying to be different in areas where The Sims has had decades and 4 iterations of a live sim game to figure out the best way to implement a build tool. And inZOI should lean into the fact that many people are familiar with The Sims, want an easy transfer of skill from The Sims, and also want to basically play The Sims, but better and not made by EA. And inZOI have already proven to be a hit with the community with their responsiveness, feedback, updates, and transparency. Now, since release, the game has proven that it does look to The Sims for much of its features. It uses an almost identical room organizing system and build menu. Canvas is basically The Sims gallery. The cheat console shortcut is exactly the same. Creator-ZOI is basically the same as Creator Sim, just with more options. Life stages are the same, they've just added more. And when Paralives comes out, I'm sure most of their features will be like The Sims 2. But currently, inZOI seems to be in this place where they worry if they copy too much, it will take the uniqueness out of their game. And so we have a roof system that isn't really a system and doesn't work. And we have a non-existent pathing system where you have to use a different tool entirely to make one. And it's clear to me that they've just been avoidant of copying too much, while equally realizing the way those things function in The Sims is pretty much the best way to do it. And they should just embrace that, because games that try and reinvent the wheel in any game genre, especially in this non-committal kind of way, have a pattern of just being swamped by the game that already has the monopoly. But like, take the cat and mouse horror game Dead by Daylight, for example. It has had multiple competitors rise up to try and compete with it during its lifespan, and they all tried to reinvent the wheel, but also be like the original in that non-committal way. And all of them flopped back to the depths after a short period of hype. In contrast, one game that has exploded recently was Marvel Rivals, which was literally known as Overwatch, but Marvel characters. Pretty much changed nothing from Overwatch except the things it knew Overwatch players complained about. Marvel Rivals took the wheel and said, "Move over, bitch, I can drive this better," and sustained a giant player base. But here is where I am genuinely concerned about inZOI. And firstly, to everyone who is thinking, it's early access, give it time, what do you expect? Well, I expect an early access game to focus on the fine-tuning and improvement of the early iteration features included in it, not simply add new objects on top of those untouched features. And that's what most other people expect too, and they are getting impatient. But the main reason for my concern takes us back to how much the devs are focusing on this modding toolkit. Because I discovered when trying to research for this video that there is a pattern where all of the updates are minor bug fixes, small live mode interactions, some items, and then a huge focus on modding options. And it feels like the devs are relying on modders to almost fine-tune everything in a just let the community make the game how they want it to be kind of way. The announcements channel in the Discord server is Modkit post after Modkit post. Steam has multiple Modkit posts. The June update post, which again was delayed for quality, started with the Modkit in bold writing. And even the YouTube channel's recent videos are all basically modding announcements and tutorials. Like, look at the scale of this known issues post, and then compare it to the length of this Modkit Q&A post. And sure, modders are talented, and I have no doubt they would be able to make the game work, but I don't want a game like City Skylines, where you needed a mod list in the hundreds to actually play the game creatively, and as that proved when City Skylines 2 released in a state that massively disappointed players. The devs had learned nothing about the direction of their game by doing it that way. But all I'm seeing when I look at all of the inZOI's channels of communication is basically them saying, "Hi, thank you for your continued support, let's talk about the mod kit." And I'm kind of losing hope. Now, people are following inZOI closely, but they aren't playing the game. And they don't want to hear about an external mod kit. They want to hear about content. They're waiting for content and to come back and try it again. But if inZOI don't start talking about the stuff that people actually care about soon, I think people are going to just stop caring. Now, I know this was long and ranty, and if you stuck this out, well done. But in conclusion, pull your finger out and make some proper choices, inZOI. Many of us are here rooting for you and waiting to come back and try again. But Paralives is now on the horizon, and the interest is going to shift fast. Like, at this rate, you better hope that that has a bunch of limitations and frustrations too, or you might be in trouble. Adding gays was good, but if you think the gays are going to stick around visiting a bunch of same-style frustrating houses, you're going to be disappointed. But that's my current thoughts on inZOI and this revisit and this brutally honest rant/discussion. Thank you so much for watching, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.